Former CIA Director and retired Army General David Petraeus is the co-author of a recently updated book that examines the evolution of warfare in the years since the end of World War II. The book is titled Conflict: The Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Ukraine. We spoke to General Petraeus earlier today. General Petraeus, good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. Yeah, it's good to... Warfare, the evolution, over the last 80 years, how has warfare evolved?
Enormously. Obviously, technology is constantly evolving. We see it even in the battlefield in Ukraine. Ukraine is outnumbered 5-1, outgunned. The economy of Russia is 15 times the size of that of Ukraine. And what has been the differentiator? How did a country with no navy sink 1/3 of the vaunted Russian Black Sea Fleet with aerial drones that they made that find the ships and maritime drones that they designed, manufactured, and employed that sink them? And 1/3 of the fleet is on the bottom of the Black Sea. They've been forced out of the Western Black Sea, including the last ship out of the centuries-old port of Sevastopol. Same on the ground. They're throwing thousands of suicide drones at the Russians every day. They produced 1.5 million just in the first 9 months of this year. And then they also have now ground robotic systems as well. And without that, they would have been just overwhelmed by the Russians. So technology continues to evolve. You see it even now with the introduction of AI for analyzing intelligence, integrating it for targeting purposes, and it speeds everything up very, very dramatically. But there still are common features.
Yes.
One we talked about just before starting is the paramount importance of good strategic leadership. Leaders at the very top who perform 4 tasks superbly. The first is to get the big ideas right, to craft the right strategy, to understand your forces, the enemy, the nature of the war, all the elements of the population, the neighborhood, the physical terrain, the human terrain, and so forth, then to communicate the big ideas effectively throughout the breadth and depth of the organization, to oversee the implementation. This is what we normally think of as leadership. This is the example the leader provides, the energy, the inspiration, attracting the best and brightest, getting those out that are not performing to standard, the metrics you use, the organizational architecture you design for it, and how you spend your time. Your battle rhythm is hugely important. We spent a lot of time when I was commanding the surge in Iraq or in Afghanistan determining how I could most effectively and efficiently and productively use my time. And among those are elements, activities, meetings, and so forth that help you perform the 4th task of a strategic leader, which is to determine how you need to refine the big ideas as the context evolves, as you achieve success or experience setbacks, so you can do it again and again and again. If you don't have great strategic leadership, the prospects for victory are not great.
You mentioned Ukraine. As far as Russia is concerned, that strategic leadership, where have they failed?
Well, they failed right from the beginning, and President Putin not understanding the extraordinary qualities of the Ukrainian forces, and frankly, the deficiency of his own forces. The quality of the small unit training was abysmal. He also underestimated President Zelensky, whose first big idea was pretty powerful. I don't want to ride, I want ammunition. I'm going to stay in Kyiv, in my capital. My family's going to stay here. We're going to fight for it. And they did, and they won the Battle of Kyiv. The Russians had to withdraw both to the north and back to the east from that particular effort. They had a campaign design on the Russian side that was just overly complex. They didn't have a real main effort that was weighted properly. Their equipment hasn't been all that. The problem is that, again, they very heavily outnumber the Ukrainians, they outgun them, and they have a lot more money. And with that, they can recruit soldiers, pay them an entire year's salary if they have to get them to come. But then they don't employ them all that well. They use human wave attacks and the rest. But quantity does have a quality, and sometimes if that quantity is sufficient relative to the opponent, the lack of great strategic leadership can actually begin to overwhelm it.
We've seen the same kind of thing in Gaza, just the overwhelming forces of Israel?
Well, you had some pretty abysmal big ideas on the part of the Hamas, frankly. I mean, to be fair, they carried out a very sophisticated attack. And the Israelis on their side didn't believe that that was possible. You know, they had the plans for the attack at lower levels, and at a certain level in the intelligence chain, they said there's no way they can do this. So it was a massive intelligence failure. It was a massive military readiness failure. The response was wholly inadequate. And it was a massive political miscalculation to think that Hamas was actually becoming, if you will, a somewhat decent member of the neighborhood and appreciating the additional worker visas and so forth when they were actually using them to case the place for how to take it down in this attack, which ultimately, of course, was absolutely inhuman, barbaric, even uploaded images and so forth. And ultimately, though, Israelis figured out very, very impressively how to dramatically degrade them, though there has been a lot of damage and destruction and loss of life. More impressively, frankly, in this regard, is what they've done to Hezbollah, where they've basically defeated Hezbollah as an organization. They've dramatically reduced their capabilities. They have not just decapitated the leadership of Hezbollah, they have decimated thousands of pagers that all exploded literally in the faces of the Hezbollah leadership, many levels down. And then the next day, the walkie-talkies blew up. These are all supply chain operations, better than the Trojan horse. I mean, this is really one for the ages. And that prevented Hezbollah from using the capacity it had to overwhelm the air and ballistic missile defenses of Israel, because they couldn't coordinate the kind of massive attack that would have used the 150,000 missiles, rockets, and drones it originally had. They're way down below 25,000 now. And because of the damage done, Israel now has gotten a ceasefire with them that is very advantageous to them.
But again, the strategic leadership, and we're getting a little bit short on time, but I want to get back to that because that's such a main focus of your book and your ideas regarding the evolution of warfare. These leadership principles at play now, at play in the Surge, at play in Vietnam, were they at play in World War II?
They've been at play in every conflict.
They're evergreen, aren't they?
They absolutely are. There are many constants, but the most significant is the importance of good strategic leadership. We've had some really admirable figures in our history who look impressive. They are impressive. They lead from the front. They're physically fit. They're courageous, all the rest. But if they don't get the big ideas right when they're at the very top, it doesn't matter. So judgment at the end of the day, when people would ask me, what do you want in your 3-star? The operational leader, I was the strategic leader in Iraq during the Surge and then in Afghanistan. You want somebody who can run with you, they thought, because I was an avid runner. They want somebody who can do this or that. I said, what I want is somebody who has great judgment. That is the foremost quality, because if you don't have that, all these other great qualities are frankly immaterial. In Vietnam, we failed those who were fighting courageously on the ground for our interests there, because we didn't get the big ideas right for 13 years, from the mid-1950s until late 1968. We said we need to fight a big war. The Vietnamese, by the way, asked us, the South Vietnamese, can you help us with security in the villages and hamlets? That's where the problem is. And we said, no, we just learned lessons in Korea, which turned out not to be wholly applicable. You need to worry about an attack across the demilitarized zone, such as what happened from the north into the south, similar to what happened, of course, in Korea. And they focused on building big forces, Vietnamese, and then brought in our big forces, and were thrashing around in the jungle. And the idea was that we could win a war of attrition with North Vietnam and then with their insurgents, the Viet Cong, if you will, inside South Vietnam. And we could not. They could escalate every time we did. We could kill 10 of them for every one of ours. That wasn't sufficient. And so we should have focused on security of the people from the beginning, because that's where, as long as the insurgents, the Viet Cong, have sanctuary there, get rice there, get recruits there, you just can't improve the lot in life. In the Surge in Iraq, the year prior to the Surge, we were doing clear and leave operations. We were trying to go home. We were handing off to the Iraqis. And over the course of that year, the violence escalated because of a Sunni Shia civil war that the Iraqis could no longer handle it. And so we had to reverse the big ideas 180 degrees. People talk about change leadership, doesn't get any bigger than completely doing the opposite of what you were doing. We had to go back to clear, hold, and build operations. We had to live with the people to secure them. We had to conduct reconciliation, strip away as many of the rank and file, because we couldn't win a war of attrition again against these. When you face such a huge force, you can't kill or capture your way to victory. You have to reconcile with as many as you can. But then the irreconcilables, you have to go out after them every single night with your most targeted elements, your special mission units. And we're doing 10 to 15 ops of that every single night, and then a greater civil military. So, and by the way, I have offered, in fact, to some Israeli leaders that if they really want to achieve their objectives in Gaza, which are to destroy Hamas, prevent them from governing again, get the hostages back, there should be an additional objective, provide a better life for the Palestinian people, but that can only be done by securing Gaza with Israeli forces. And until you do that, no Arab forces, no Palestinian forces, no contractors, no organized provision of humanitarian assistance will be possible. It's a tough call. It's not one that we have said we want them to do. They don't want to do it, but I see no alternative. And we did learn a bit about this, often the hard way, in Iraq and Afghanistan.
The book is Conflict, The Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Ukraine, General David Petraeus. Fascinating stuff. Good to have you here. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Ted.